Don't bother showing up to the BBQ tomorrow, my mom Delilah said, holding the broken pieces of my grandmother's antique crystal vase. This family gathering isn't for people like you anymore. I looked at the shattered heirloom I'd spent months restoring as a surprise gift for her birthday, now destroyed on her kitchen floor in Willowbrook Heights. Understood, I said calmly, then walked out. 3 weeks later, the foreclosure notice arrived at her door, and she finally realized that the mortgage payments she'd been depending on for 2 years had quietly stopped coming from my account. I never thought my own mother would become my biggest enemy that day. Honestly, if someone had told me 48 hours before that BBQ weekend that I'd end up watching Delilah lose the house she'd lived in for 23 years on Maple Ridge Drive, I would have called them completely insane. I had been planning this whole celebration for months, not just the gift restoration, but what I thought would be the perfect family reunion to celebrate her 58th birthday. It was supposed to be one of those rare moments when everything finally felt right again in our fractured family. No drama, no blatant favoritism toward my siblings, just genuine appreciation and love for once. My name is Zara, I'm 32 years old, and up until that devastating Saturday afternoon, I thought I was the responsible daughter who held our family together. I've been living in downtown Clearwater for the past 8 years, working my way up from an entry-level marketing coordinator to regional director at Pinnacle Digital Solutions. It wasn't easy. I pulled 60-hour weeks, took night classes for my MBA, and sacrificed most of my 20s to build something meaningful. But finally, I was in a position where I could really help my family in ways that mattered. The house on Maple Ridge Drive was where I grew up, where all my childhood memories lived. It's a modest 3-bedroom colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch that Delilah and my late father Garrett bought when I was 7 years old. After Dad died from a heart attack 6 years ago, Mom struggled to keep up with the mortgage payments on her part-time income from the local library in Willowbrook Heights. That's when I quietly stepped in, transferring $1,847 every month to cover the mortgage, property taxes, and home insurance. I never made a big deal about it, never held it over her head. I just did it, because that's what family does, right? It was a Saturday afternoon in late May, one of those perfect spring days in Willowbrook Heights where the dogwood trees were blooming and everything smelled like fresh possibilities. I pulled up to the familiar driveway in my Honda Civic, the restored crystal vase carefully wrapped in bubble wrap and nestled in a custom wooden box on my passenger seat. My hands were actually shaking with excitement as I parked behind my brother Casper's beat-up Ford Explorer and my sister Meadow's silver Nissan Sentra. I'd been working on that vase restoration for 4 months. The vase had belonged to my grandmother Cordelia, my father's mother, and it was this absolutely gorgeous piece of hand-blown crystal from the 1940s with intricate rose etchings around the rim. When I was 12, I accidentally knocked it off the mantelpiece while playing with our cat, Whiskers. It shattered into dozens of pieces, and I still remember Mom crying as she swept up the fragments. She kept the larger pieces in a shoebox in her bedroom closet, always saying it was irreplaceable, that losing it felt like losing another piece of Grandma Cordelia. For years, I felt guilty about breaking it. So when my coworker Jasmine told me about this incredible restoration artist named Elena Vasquez, I knew I had to try. Elena worked out of a tiny studio in the Arts District of downtown Clearwater, and she was expensive, $2,800 for the full restoration, but she guaranteed it would look exactly like it was before the accident. I brought her the shoebox of fragments back in January, and she spent months carefully piecing it together, using some kind of special adhesive and technique that made the cracks completely invisible. The day I picked it up from Elena's studio, I actually teared up looking at it. It was perfect. The crystal caught the light exactly the same way it used to, and those delicate rose etchings looked like they'd never been damaged. Elena had even researched the original maker. Apparently, it was crafted by a small company in Bohemia that only operated for about 10 years. She gave me this whole presentation about its history, telling me pieces like this were worth at least $4,000 in perfect condition. I had the whole day planned out in my head. I'd arrive at Mom's house around 2 p.m., help her with any last-minute BBQ preparations, and then present the vase during the family gathering. I imagined her face when she realized what it was. That moment of recognition, maybe some tears, definitely a huge hug. I pictured her showing it off to Casper and Meadow, telling them how thoughtful I was, how much this gesture meant to her. For once, I'd be the daughter who did something truly special, something that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. The BBQ was supposed to be a big celebration. Mom had invited about 20 people, my siblings and their families, some neighbors, a few of her friends from the library, even our old family friend Mrs. Patterson from next door. She'd been planning the menu for weeks, excited about trying out this new marinade recipe she found online. I'd offered to help pay for the food and decorations, but she'd insisted she had it covered. Looking back now, I wonder if that should have been my first red flag. I grabbed the wrapped vase from the passenger seat and walked up the familiar stone pathway to the front porch, the same path I'd walked thousands of times as a kid. The screen door was propped open, and I could hear voices and laughter coming from inside. The smell of barbecue sauce and grilled meat was already wafting from the backyard, making my mouth water. Everything seemed perfect and normal. "Mom, I'm here!" I called out as I stepped into the living room, carefully balancing the wooden box containing the vase. The house looked exactly the same as always. Same beige carpet, same family photos covering every surface, same worn leather recliner where Dad used to watch the evening news. But something felt different in the atmosphere, though I couldn't put my finger on what. Delilah emerged from the kitchen wearing her favorite floral apron, the one Meadow had given her for Mother's Day 3 years ago. But instead of her usual warm smile when I arrived, she had this strange, almost cold expression on her face. Her graying brown hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she was holding a wooden spoon like it was some kind of weapon. "Oh," she said flatly, looking at me like I was an unexpected door-to-door salesperson. "You're here." That was my first real warning sign. Not "hi, honey," or "perfect timing," or even just "hello." Just "you're here." Like my presence was somehow inconvenient or surprising, even though we'd confirmed I was coming just 2 days earlier. "Of course I'm here," I laughed, trying to shake off the weird vibe. "I wouldn't miss your birthday celebration for anything. And wait until you see what I brought you. It's going to blow your mind." I held up the wooden box, practically bouncing on my toes with excitement. I'd been looking forward to this moment for months, imagining her reaction over and over again during the long restoration process. But instead of curiosity or excitement, Mom's expression somehow got even colder. She glanced toward the kitchen, where I could hear Casper and Meadow talking in low voices, then back at me with what I can only describe as irritation. "Zara, we need to talk," she said, setting the wooden spoon down on the coffee table. "Before you get too comfortable." The way she said "too comfortable" sent a chill down my spine. I'd grown up in this house, spent the first 18 years of my life here, and I was still paying the mortgage. How could I be too comfortable in what used to be my own home? "Sure, Mom, what's going on?" I asked, though part of me was already dreading the answer. I set the wooden box carefully on the couch, making sure it was stable and away from the edge. That's when Casper emerged from the kitchen, carrying a beer bottle and wearing the smug expression I remembered from our childhood whenever he was about to get me in trouble. Casper is 35, 3 years older than me, and he spent most of his adult life bouncing between jobs and girlfriends while living in Mom's basement. He's got this perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and always wears graphic t-shirts that are just a little too small for his growing beer belly. "Hey there, little sister," he said with fake cheerfulness, taking a long swig of his Budweiser. "Glad you could make it before we have our little chat." Meadow appeared right behind him, and I immediately noticed she was holding a folded piece of paper in her manicured hands. Meadow is 29, the baby of the family, and she's always been Mom's obvious favorite. She's got this perfectly straight blonde hair that she gets professionally styled twice a month, always wears expensive yoga clothes, even though I've never seen her exercise, and has this annoying habit of talking about everyone behind their backs while pretending to be concerned. "Hi, Zara," Meadow said sweetly, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We've been talking, and, well, we think it's time we addressed some things." I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't the warm family gathering I'd been expecting. This felt like some kind of intervention, and I was apparently the target. Addressed what things? I asked, though I was starting to get a very bad feeling about where this conversation was heading. Mom walked over to her favorite armchair, the burgundy recliner that used to be Dad's, and sat down with her arms crossed. Casper and Meadow positioned themselves on either side of her like bodyguards. I was still standing in the middle of the living room, holding my keys and suddenly feeling very out of place in the house I'd grown up in. Zara, honey, Mom began, using that patronizing tone she used to use when I was in trouble as a teenager. We've been talking as a family, and we've realized some things need to change around here. What kind of things? I asked, though I was pretty sure I didn't want to hear the answer. Meadow unfolded the piece of paper she'd been holding and glanced at it like she was reading from a script. Well, for starters, we think you've been a little too involved in family decisions lately, and maybe a little too controlling with your opinions about how things should be done. I stared at her in complete confusion. Controlling? What are you talking about? I barely even voice opinions about family stuff. Casper laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. Come on, Zara, you know exactly what we're talking about. The way you act like you know what's best for everyone just because you have some fancy job and live in your expensive downtown apartment. My expensive apartment, I repeated, feeling like I was in some kind of alternate reality. Casper, you live in Mom's basement rent-free. I live in a one-bedroom apartment that costs me $1,200 a month. See, Meadow jumped in, pointing at me like I'd just proven her point. Right there, that attitude, always throwing money around like it makes you better than us. I felt my face getting hot with confusion and anger. Throwing money around? When have I ever thrown money around? I've never once made anyone feel bad about money. But even as I said it, I was starting to understand what this was really about. This wasn't about my attitude or being controlling. This was about the fact that I had financial stability and they didn't. This was about resentment that had been building up while I'd been working my ass off to build a career. Mom held up her hand to stop the argument. The point is, Zara, we've decided that tomorrow's barbecue is going to be just immediate family. People who really understand what this family is about. People who belong here. The words hit me like a physical blow. People who belong here? Mom, I'm your daughter. This is my family too. Of course you're my daughter, she said, but her voice was cold and distant. But you've made it very clear over the years that you have your own life now. Your career, your apartment in the city, your new friends. You don't really need us anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Don't need you? Mom, you're my family. Of course I need you. That's why I'm here. That's why I wanted to celebrate your birthday with everyone. Casper rolled his eyes. Right, celebrate. With some expensive gift that's probably going to make the rest of us look bad, am I right? He gestured toward the wooden box I'd set on the couch, and I instinctively stepped closer to it, suddenly protective of my carefully planned surprise. It's not about making anyone look bad, I said quietly. It's about showing Mom how much she means to me. By throwing money at the problem? Meadow snapped. That's always your solution, isn't it, Zara? Just buy your way into being the favorite daughter. Her words stung because they were so completely wrong. I'd never tried to buy anyone's affection. Every financial help I'd given, every gift I'd bought, came from genuine love and desire to help my family. I'd never once expected anything in return except basic appreciation and respect. That's not what this is about, I said, my voice starting to crack with emotion. I restored something that meant a lot to Mom, something that's been broken for 20 years. It took me months of work and saving up money, and I did it because I love her. Mom's expression didn't soften at all. If anything, she looked more irritated. And that's exactly the problem, Zara. You think you can just fix everything with money. You think you can solve problems that aren't yours to solve. Problems that aren't mine to solve? I repeated, feeling like I was losing my mind. Mom, I've been helping with the mortgage on this house for 2 years. I've been helping because I wanted to, because I love this family. The moment those words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. The three of them exchanged glances, and I realized they'd been building up to this conversation for a while. They'd planned this intervention, prepared their talking points, and I'd just walked right into their trap. And there it is, Casper said with satisfaction. She finally admits it. Miss Successful has been paying our bills, and now she thinks she owns us. That's not what I said, I protested. That's not what I meant at all. But Mom was already shaking her head. Zara, I think it would be better if you didn't come to the barbecue tomorrow. This is supposed to be a celebration for people who understand what family really means. People who don't see relationships as financial transactions. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. Mom, you know that's not how I see our relationship. I help because I love you, not because I want control. Then prove it, Meadow said, crossing her arms. If you really love us and it's not about control, then back off. Let us handle our own lives without your interference. I looked around the living room, the same room where we used to open Christmas presents, where Dad taught me to play chess, where I'd done homework at the coffee table for years. Now, it felt like enemy territory, with three people I'd loved my whole life treating me like an unwelcome stranger. Fine, I said quietly, picking up the wooden box from the couch. If that's what you want. But as I turned to leave, Casper called out behind me. Wait a minute, Zara. Aren't you going to leave your little gift since you spent all that money on it? I turned back around, still holding the box protectively against my chest. I think I'll keep it, actually. Oh, come on, Meadow said with fake sweetness. Don't be petty. Mom would probably like to see what you bought for her, even if she can't properly appreciate it right now. Something about the way she said properly appreciate made my skin crawl, but I was emotionally exhausted and just wanted to get out of there. Against my better judgment, I set the wooden box back down on the coffee table. It's the crystal vase, I said quietly. Grandma Cordelia's vase that I broke when I was 12. I had it professionally restored. It looks exactly like it did before. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in Mom's eyes. Surprise, maybe even gratitude. Grandma Cordelia had been the most important person in her life aside from Dad, and I knew losing that vase had genuinely hurt her. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by that same cold expression she'd worn since I arrived. That was thoughtful, she said stiffly, but it doesn't change anything, Zara. I nodded, feeling completely defeated. I understand. I'll go now. I made it halfway to the front door before I heard the crash. The sound of breaking crystal is unmistakable. It's sharp and final, like the sound of something precious being destroyed forever. I spun around to see Mom standing over the coffee table, the wooden box open beside her, and pieces of crystal scattered across the floor. She'd picked up the vase and dropped it, deliberately, while looking straight at me. Oops, she said flatly, not a trace of emotion in her voice. I stared at the shattered pieces of crystal on the carpet, the same crystal I'd spent 4 months and $2,800 restoring, the same vase that had taken Elena weeks of careful work to repair. Grandma Cordelia's irreplaceable heirloom was once again broken into dozens of fragments, but this time it wasn't an accident. This time it was a weapon. Mom, I whispered, feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. Why would you do that? She looked down at the broken crystal with complete indifference. Like I said, this family gathering isn't for people like you anymore. That's when I finally understood. This wasn't about my attitude or being controlling or any of the other accusations they'd thrown at me. This was about power. They'd gotten used to my financial support, but they resented having to feel grateful for it. They wanted my money, but not my presence, my help, but not my opinions, my contribution, but not my voice in family decisions. And when I'd showed up with a gift that represented months of thoughtful effort, something that couldn't be reduced to a simple financial transaction, they'd felt threatened. So they'd destroyed it, just to show me they could. Understood, I said calmly, looking at the three people who had just revealed exactly who they really were. I walked out of that house on Maple Ridge Drive for what I knew would be the last time as a welcome family member. But I wasn't crying anymore. The shock and hurt were already crystallizing into something much colder and more determined. By the time I got back to my apartment in downtown Clearwater, I knew exactly what I was going to do. And it wasn't going to involve any more broken crystal, or cruel words, or fake family meetings. It was going to involve the kind of consequences they'd never see coming until it was far too late. That night, I sat in my downtown Clearwater apartment, staring at my laptop screen. The image of that deliberately shattered crystal vase burned into my memory. But I wasn't crying anymore. The hurt had transformed into something much more dangerous, crystal clear determination. I opened my banking app and navigated to the automatic transfer section. There it was, Delilah Morrison, mortgage payment, $1,847 monthly. I'd set it up 2 years ago when she was struggling after Dad's death, never making a big deal about it, never asking for gratitude, just quietly ensuring she could keep the house on Maple Ridge Drive. With 3 clicks, I canceled it. But that was just the beginning. I scrolled through my other automatic payments and found more gifts I'd forgotten about. The $340 monthly payment for her car insurance? Gone. The $180 quarterly payment for her home security system? Deleted. The $95 monthly subscription to her premium cable package that she couldn't live without? Canceled. Then I remembered the credit card. 2 years ago, during a particularly bad month, I'd added Delilah as an authorized user on my account, just for emergencies. According to my statement, she'd charged $1,200 last month alone. Groceries, gas, even a spa day with Meadow. I called the credit card company and removed her access immediately. Next, I checked my records for Casper. The lazy fool had been borrowing money from me for years, always promising to pay it back when things got better. The car loan I'd co-signed for his Ford Explorer 3 years ago, I called the bank and discovered I could legally request immediate full payment since he'd missed 2 payments recently. I made that call too. For Meadow, it was the babysitting money. She worked part-time at a boutique, but constantly complained she couldn't afford childcare for her 5-year-old daughter Luna. So I'd been quietly paying her babysitter $600 monthly, thinking I was helping my niece have stability. That payment got canceled faster than I could blink. But the real masterpiece was what I discovered when I logged into the property records for Willowbrook Heights. When Dad died, there had been some complex legal issues with the house ownership. To help Mom avoid probate complications, I'd been added as a co-owner of the Maple Ridge property. At the time, it seemed like a smart way to protect the family home. Now, it meant I had legal rights they'd completely forgotten about. I drafted an email to my lawyer, Marcus Chen, requesting an immediate consultation about property ownership rights and financial obligations. Then I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time since leaving that house. They thought they could humiliate me, exclude me, and destroy something precious while still expecting my money to keep flowing. They thought I was just the family ATM who'd never dare stand up for herself. Tomorrow, they'd have their precious BBQ without me. They'd laugh and celebrate their victory, probably making jokes about how they put me in my place. But in exactly 12 days, when the mortgage payment didn't arrive, when the car insurance lapsed, when the credit card stopped working, they'd finally understand what they'd actually lost. And by then, it would be far too late to fix what they'd broken.